This is a game-changing clip about Anki from a longer video I did with Daniel Amin, one of the medical students in my cohort. That video is coming out soon, but I highly encourage you watch this clip. It's an absolute banger, and we'll get straight into it.
Another area I wanted to ask about was the pre-made Anki decks. I don't have a lot of experience with pre-made decks. Obviously, they save you the time of having to make your own cards. Um, what's your experience with them? I guess when I've tried briefly, I found it a bit hard just to know what to expect from the answers when someone's made the card. But yeah, talk us through your experience with the pre-made Ankis and the pros and cons.
Um, that's a good point that you've mentioned about it's hard to know what to expect in the answers and the quality of cards out there is quite different. I think the thing I will say is I didn't use Anki religiously like you're meant to. Like the way I think it's meant to be made is you do it every day. You have new cards and reviews, and you get a certain amount. You need to complete the reviews. And to be honest, that's probably by far the most effective way if you've got very good cards and very good decks out there. But to be honest, it's very time consuming. It's very, very time consuming. And you probably are going to start, at least for me, I found that if I were to do that, I wouldn't have time for other things. I wouldn't have time for practice questions and other things or other things in life. So I found that that was I didn't really use it that way. But what I did use it is I used it as a way to kind of engage with the content and to kind of learn a bit and to fill in the gaps. So it was almost for the sake of having short answer questions, almost to some extent, but it was just in Anki form, if that makes sense. So just trying to fill in the blanks or something like that. I found that um, you're right in that, particularly if they're made by other people, sometimes there is the time where there are things that aren't 100% accurate in them. But to be honest with you, that process of actually trying to critically go through the deck and trying to see, hang on, is that right? Or let me double check with my lecture. That process itself is very good learning. So even if it's got wrong information, you need to just not take it as necessarily gospel or something, and you need to just be honest and say, all right, this is just a study tool. I'm going to try and study. It's not going to, this is not like the only study technique. And therefore, if there are wrong things, I'll hopefully work it out. So because I used it in a way to kind of revise content, if there was something I didn't know, I'd go back to the lecture from the Anki and read up about it or do some learning about it. Because that's how I used it. I found that even if there was wrong, if there was something I didn't know that was written there, and I'd still have to search it up for myself, I wouldn't accept it. So Anki wouldn't necessarily be my way of learning new content, but it would be a way, while it was to some extent, but it was a way to direct me to the places that I need to do some more work on and to learn. That was my way of doing it. Now, to be honest, that's not the way most people use Anki, and that's not the way you're meant to use Anki, but it was the way that kind of worked for me. Um, the other thing I will say is there are very good pre-made decks out there. I think not all of them are for there are very good American stuff online that you can find, like very good American decks and that sort of thing. That the Americans have really mastered the art of Anki quite well, but and I don't think we're there necessarily in Australia. The other problem with Anki and what I'm talking about with the American is sometimes it's not exactly what they want you to learn. So sometimes the lecturer has a certain thing in mind that they want to test, and then the Americans have a certain thing in mind that they want to test, and you kind of need to marry them up together. So that's a bit of a risk with that. But particularly when we had less formalized lectures, for example, in the clinical years of med school, I found that those American decks and stuff were quite useful because, medicine is not that different after all. It's you still have a disease, you still have a disease process. You have different guidelines of management, sure, that's a relevant difference, but I found that still those were really really useful resources, particularly for basic sciences, but also for clinical stuff and disease processes. It doesn't change too much, so um, there are some different quality, but just the process of even having to make up your own. What I generally did is I had my own deck from that I made up from cards from other decks. So I would kind of go through the decks, transfer them into my own, and that would be my sort of study way. And that itself of trying to find the relevant content and trying to see what's relevant, that itself is study, in my opinion. That itself is an active learning process of, okay, this is the topic, this looks good, this is relevant to the lecture, etc. That is a good process itself. Or I found it was a good process of having to learn what I need to know.
Okay, so in terms of how this fits in, do you sort of use Anki like sort of alongside the practice questions as a screen for what you don't know, and then like if the card looks good, you'll transfer it into your own deck, and if it's like just something you already know, you might just delete the card and you'll do it, sporadically rather than consistently.
Um, I'll give you an example of how I used it in pre-clean. How I used it was every Saturday. Saturday would be my revision day for the lectures of that week. And during that time, I would do so I'd watch the lectures throughout the week, and then on the Saturday, I would revise the lectures, and I'd revise them by going through Anki, and then I'd also revise them by going through MCQs. So to be honest, it was just another way of doing more practice, to be honest with you, than anything, and knowing where the gaps are. So probably that would probably be the answer to that.
Yeah. So like the lectures will be on specific topics. You'll go find flashcards for those topics, do the flashcards. They'll uncover some things about what you don't know. If it's a good flashcard, you can save it for in your own deck to repeat. And then the ones you get wrong prompts you to, do some further research or revisit the lecture
Yeah,
to like
sort
address
of.
that
Yeah,
gap.
yeah, yeah.
That's that's uh that's really interesting. And I don't know if there's a right way to use Anki because the two most common complaints are like it's too hard to do Anki every day and it takes too long to build my cards. And this approach like doesn't have either of those two problems because you can just do it like
Mm,
once a week and you don't need to have like consistency with when you do your cards. And that's one of the like challenges with Ankis. If you sort of stop doing Anki for like 2 weeks because you go on holiday, then you have like this giant backlog of cards,
mm,
and it sort of stuffs up some of the algorithms as well.
mm.
So that's really interesting. Just having a set Anki time, which you can like get your cards done, and then using them as short answer questions, as you said, because
I think
they
this kind of comes back to what you were saying about understanding versus memorizing as well. Because if you're using Anki to purely memorize, you probably have to do it every day. But if you're using the Anki to help you understand and force you to go back and understand the content, that it's you probably don't therefore need to do the Anki every day if you're trying to understand it. Because if you can logic your way through the topic and that, then then yes, memorizing is still a role, don't get me wrong, but the role of it being a purely memory tool, which is no longer needed necessarily. So that was what worked for me. But yeah.
and I think anyone who has those issues with Anki, the consistency issue, the making cards issue, like this is definitely an approach that should be considered. Do you know many others who use this approach, or is this something that you came up with yourself?
Um it was uh I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure. It was something I just started doing. I just started doing. I needed a way to revise. Like I was like, oh God, there's all these lectures. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I need a way to revise them, and I just started doing it. So I didn't necessarily. I think it was also lucky because they were released. We had like people above us in the year in year one and year two teaching us, and it just turned out really nicely that they were releasing it by week. So I guess it just worked out that I started following the weeks that they were releasing it, and it worked out really nicely that way. So um, I think that worked for me at least.
If you enjoyed this small clip, you'll enjoy the full episode, which is coming out soon. Best place to find it is to stay subscribed to the channel and watch out because this is one of the best videos I've done. Highly recommend. See you there.